What if I told you that the difference between the people who dream of changing the world and the ones who actually do isn't talent, luck, or even intelligence? It's how they use their time. Bill Gates understood that early. While most people chase busyness, he chased impact. He didn't measure his worth by how many hours he worked, but by how much progress he made toward a vision that seemed impossible: to put a computer on every desk, in every home. Imagine having that kind of focus, like waking up every morning not to get through the day, but to shape it. That's what productivity truly means. You see, the world glorifies being busy. We post about all-nighters, endless meetings, multitasking, as if chaos is a badge of honor. But Bill Gates saw through that illusion. He knew being busy isn't the same as being productive. Productivity isn't motion, it's direction. It's not how many things you do, it's how many things actually matter. And when you look at how Gates worked, how he thought, how he built Microsoft from a tiny dorm room into one of the most influential companies on the planet, you realize this man mastered the art of prioritizing what truly counts. He wasn't the loudest person in the room, but he was always the most prepared. When his classmates were celebrating weekends, Gates was buried in computer manuals, teaching himself what universities hadn't even started teaching yet. Not because someone told him to, but because he was obsessed with progress. He believed that knowledge, when directed toward purpose, was the ultimate multiplier of productivity. Every hour he spent learning gave him leverage to move 10 steps ahead of everyone else. Think about that for a second. Most people wait for perfect timing, the right environment, or someone's approval to get started. Gates didn't. He turned ideas into action long before the world was ready to understand them. He didn't ask, "Can it be done?" He asked, "How can I make it happen?" That's the mindset that separates high performers from dreamers, not waiting for opportunity, but creating it through focused execution. And what's fascinating is, even as one of the richest and busiest people on earth, Bill Gates still guards his time like it's the most valuable resource he owns, because it is. He plans his days with precision, yet he leaves room for reflection. He believes time without clarity is wasted energy. Every hour is a decision, a choice between distraction and direction. That's why his life isn't just full, it's focused. So, before we dive into the exact rules Bill Gates lives by, ask yourself this: when was the last time you stopped to ask, am I working smart or just working hard? Because once you understand how Gates defines productivity, it will completely transform how you see work, success, and even time itself. This isn't just about doing more, it's about becoming more, and that shift changes everything. Bill Gates once said something that flips the traditional idea of hard work on its head. It's not about how late you stay in the office, it's about what you accomplish. Most people believe success is built by long hours, sleepless nights, and endless effort. But Gates knew that the number of hours you put in means nothing if those hours don't move the needle. When he was building Microsoft, he wasn't counting minutes, he was counting milestones. He didn't care about filling his schedule. He cared about filling his days with progress. That's the difference between staying busy and building something that lasts. In the early days, Gates and his partner, Paul Allen, didn't have fancy offices or massive teams. They had one computer, a shared vision, and an obsession with making something meaningful. They worked long hours, yes, but not because they glorified hard work. They did it because every second was an investment towards something bigger than themselves. While the world saw two young programmers, they saw a revolution. They didn't say, "We'll work 8 hours a day." They said, "We'll work until this problem is solved." That's the power of impact-driven thinking. It's not measured by time, but by transformation. Here's the truth. Most people confuse activity with achievement. They think if their calendar is full, they must be succeeding. But Bill Gates approached work like a strategist, not a sprinter. He asked one question every day: what's the highest value thing I can do right now? If it didn't bring him closer to his goal, he eliminated it. That's why he was able to build one of the most powerful companies in history, not because he did more than others, but because he focused on what mattered more. Think of it like this: you can work 10 hours chasing the wrong task or 1 hour solving the right problem, and that single hour could create more progress than the other 10 combined. That's how Gates thought. He didn't waste his time doing things just to say he was working. He built leverage into everything he did. Whether it was writing code, negotiating deals, or planning new products, his goal was always the same: make the biggest possible impact with the least possible friction. That's not laziness, that's mastery. When you think in terms of impact, your priorities shift. You stop asking, how much time do I have? And start asking, what result do I want to create? You stop filling your days with noise and start building days that matter. That's why Gates's calendar was never a to-do list. It was a strategy map. Every meeting, every project, every commitment had to earn its place. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. Productivity isn't about doing more things. It's about doing the right things. The goal isn't to fill time, but to make time count. When you operate from that mindset, your work becomes sharper, your results grow faster, and your life becomes infinitely more meaningful. Because in the end, the world doesn't remember how long you worked. It remembers what you built. One of the most powerful productivity habits Bill Gates ever created wasn't about working harder, it was about stepping back. He calls it his Think Week. Twice a year, Gates completely disconnects from the noise. No meetings, no emails, no distractions, just a cabin in the woods, stacks of books, pages of notes, and a single goal: to think deeply. It's in these moments of isolation that some of his biggest insights have been born. During one Think Week in the 1990s, Gates read a memo about the rise of the internet. Most CEOs at that time ignored it. Gates didn't. He stopped everything, reimagined Microsoft's future, and within months, changed the company's entire direction to align with the coming digital revolution. That decision didn't just save Microsoft, it helped define the next era of technology. Think about that for a second. The future of one of the world's largest companies wasn't decided in a boardroom. It was decided in silence, in a moment of reflection. That's the real magic of a Think Week. It's not about escaping responsibility. It's about returning to it with clarity, because clarity is power. Most people are drowning in information but starving for insight. They consume endlessly but rarely pause to process. Gates understood that knowledge only becomes valuable when you give yourself time to connect the dots. In a world that glorifies hustle, taking time to think might seem unproductive. But Gates saw it as the most productive thing he could do. While others were chasing deadlines, he was chasing direction. He knew that a single week of deep thinking could produce more innovation than 100 meetings ever could. That's the power of intentional solitude. It's where ideas mature, where patterns emerge, and where vision becomes strategy. And this isn't just about CEOs or billionaires. You don't need a cabin or 7 days off to have your own Think Week. You can create your own version of it. A day, an afternoon, even an hour each week where you step away from the noise. Turn off your phone, close your laptop, ask yourself bigger questions. What am I building? Where am I going? What truly matters right now? You'll be amazed at the clarity that comes when the noise fades. Bill Gates has always believed that focus requires space, and space requires discipline. Most people fill every gap in their day with scrolling, replying, or reacting. But the leaders who shape the world know how to pause. They know creativity doesn't live in chaos, it thrives in quiet. Gates' Think Weeks weren't a luxury, they were a necessity, a time to reconnect with purpose and see the bigger picture beyond the daily grind. Because when you give yourself time to think, you don't just find new answers, you start asking better questions. And that's where all great innovation begins. The truth is, productivity isn't always about movement. Sometimes the smartest move you can make is to stop. Bill Gates once sat down with Warren Buffett for a conversation that would reveal one of the simplest yet most powerful truths about success. When someone asked both men to write down the single word that defined their achievements, they didn't hesitate. They each wrote the same word: focus. Think about that. Two of the most accomplished minds in modern history, men who could pursue any opportunity, fund any idea, build anything they wanted, both agreed that the key to extraordinary results wasn't intelligence, resources, or even creativity. It was focus, the ability to direct energy, attention, and effort toward what truly matters, and to guard it fiercely from everything that doesn't. When Gates was building Microsoft, distractions were everywhere. Competitors were racing to catch up, the media doubted his vision, and the world was changing faster than anyone could predict. But while everyone else was trying to do everything, Gates was focused on doing one thing: building the best software the world had ever seen. He didn't spread himself thin, chasing side projects or short-term wins. He poured his entire mind into solving one problem at a time, and that discipline gave him an edge no one else could match. His focus wasn't just attention, it was commitment. It was the refusal to let noise dictate his direction. And that's what most people struggle with today. We live in a world of constant distraction. Phones buzzing, notifications popping, endless streams of information demanding our attention. But productivity doesn't live in that chaos. It lives in the moments when you can silence the noise long enough to think deeply, to create, to build. Gates often worked in what his team called deep work mode, long, uninterrupted stretches where he coded for hours without stopping. No multitasking, no interruptions, just pure concentration. That's how breakthroughs happen, not by juggling a dozen things, but by locking in on one thing and mastering it. Focus, to Gates, was a muscle. You train it by saying no. He turned down opportunities that didn't align with his vision, even when they looked tempting. He believed that every yes you give is a trade-off. It takes time, energy, and attention away from something that might matter more. That's why he was so intentional about how he spent his time. He wasn't just managing hours, he was managing impact. Every choice was strategic. Every task connected to a larger mission. That's what real focus looks like. Not rigidity, but precision. When you develop that kind of clarity, everything changes. Your decisions get easier. Your progress accelerates. You stop scattering your energy across endless possibilities and start directing it like a laser toward one purpose. Gates understood that success isn't about doing 100 things well. It's about doing one thing exceptionally well and having the discipline to stay with it long enough to make it extraordinary. Because at the end of the day, focus isn't just a skill. It's a superpower. It's what allows ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And once you master it, you don't just get more done. You start building the kind of life and legacy that can't be distracted away. If there's one thing that separates the good from the truly great, it's an unstoppable hunger to learn. Bill Gates has always been a student, not just of technology, but of life itself. Even after building one of the most successful companies in history, he never stopped learning. He reads about 50 books every year, covering everything from science and history to leadership and philosophy. He takes notes, highlights ideas, and reflects on what each lesson means for the future. Gates doesn't read to escape the world, he reads to understand it. He knows that learning isn't a phase, it's a lifelong advantage. Because the moment you stop learning, you start falling behind. What's powerful about Gates's approach is how intentional it is. He doesn't read randomly or consume information without purpose. He studies patterns, looks for insights, and connects ideas across fields. He once said, "If you think you know it all, you're already behind." That mindset, the humility to admit there's always more to learn, is what keeps him ahead in a world that never stops changing. Most people treat learning as something they did in school. Gates treats it as something he does every day. That's why, even decades after stepping down as Microsoft's CEO, he still influences industries far beyond technology, from global health to clean energy. Because when you keep learning, you keep expanding the possibilities of who you can become. When he was younger, Gates would spend long nights reading technical papers just to understand how others approached problems. He didn't wait for mentors to teach him. He went out and found his own lessons. Every book, every conversation, every failure became part of his education. He wasn't just learning facts, he was learning how to think. That's the real secret. The best learners don't just collect information. They train their minds to see patterns, to question assumptions, to adapt faster than the world changes. In business and in life, this kind of relentless curiosity is a superpower. Gates never allowed success to make him complacent. He always stayed a student. When new technologies emerged, he didn't dismiss them. He studied them. When he moved into philanthropy, he didn't rely on reputation. He educated himself on global health, poverty, and sustainability with the same intensity he once applied to computer science. That's what makes his journey extraordinary. He never confused achievement with arrival. He knew that every success is just a new starting point for more learning, more growth, more evolution. And here's the part most people miss. Learning relentlessly isn't just about reading books or taking courses. It's about mindset. It's about curiosity. It's about the courage to say, I don't know this yet, but I can learn. Gates embodies that spirit. He knows that the fastest way to stay relevant in an unpredictable world is to keep feeding your mind. Because every new skill, every new insight, every new idea multiplies your ability to create, to adapt, and to lead. That's why, even now, with more achievements than most people could imagine, Bill Gates still sees himself as a student of the future. He understands that the most powerful investment you can ever make, the one that compounds forever, is in your own mind. The more you learn, the more capable you become of building something that outlasts you. And that's not just productivity, that's legacy.